Alright, I'm back with another Road to 2200 video, and this one's going to be a little bit different. Instead of one game, I'm going to show you two, because I played the same guy twice because he rematched me. Both of them were 10-minute games, and fortunately, I was able to win both. And they were actually eerily similar games because both of them were 33 moves each and roughly 81% accuracy for both of them, which was kind of scary. But not really my best chess, but still interesting games to take a look at. So I started this game off with d4. This is the first game of the two. I'm going to try and run through them a little bit quickly because there are two of them. He goes knight f6, pawn to c4, pawn c5, we have a Benoni, pawn to d5, gaining space here, and then typically they either go e6, d6, e5, the check Benoni, or what happened in the game, the Benko Gambit. So this is offering up a pawn, and then black will play a6 and give up another pawn. Usually I just sidestep this. I have a very cute sideline where I go pawn to a4. And most of the time they go pawn to b4. I don't think it's necessarily the best move. And usually I go queen c2 and e4 here and reserve the right to go knight d2 and go knight b3, but I decided to go b3 in this game and just try and put my bishop on the long diagonal right away. And I don't think this is necessarily the best way to play, and it should just lead to a relatively balanced position, but white's moves are usually pretty easy to play. As well as black's. Black usually just adopts the same setup regardless, where he just goes g6, bishop g7, and then I just chose to play f4 here. The engine doesn't really love this, regardless of whether e6 or e5 is played. In this particular line, I'm going to end up taking, and then just finishing my development and castling. And it leads to a relatively balanced position. Nothing too crazy is going on yet. So knight d7 was played. I think this is probably a slight inaccuracy. I think what would have been better was probably e6 or e5, but after knight d7 I go knight f3. Once again, probably not the best move. It might be better to go knight to h3, but that's not really a move that I had on my radar. So I ended up going knight f3. Knight to g4 is played, looking to fork me if I castle. So I played bishop takes g7, king takes g7, and queen e2 to stop the knight from coming in. Pawn to f5 is played, and this was just a bit too aggressive, I think, because after e takes f5, g takes f5, I've got this semi-open e-file that I can use to my advantage, and black really can't go e6 or e5 to try and get rid of this weak backward e7 pawn. So this pawn is really just going to be a target. e6 square is weak, so I just really don't think f5 was the correct way that black should be playing in this position. I go knight to g5, just eyeing up that square immediately, threatening the family fork. Black goes knight f6 to defend that square, and then I go pawn to h3, kicking the knight, knight h6, and I castle queenside. So my king is very safe over on the queen side because it's completely blocked over here. There's no way that black is going to be able to break through over here. So my king is safe over here, and I can look to maybe play something like g4 and attack him. Queen e8 was played. I played rook h to e1. I'm kind of like unsure what to do here. I think g4 would be too aggressive right away. I'm not really sure if it's all that great. So I just slowly improve my position. Rook a7, queen f2, and then I'm just looking to maybe double rooks, or maybe look to play something like queen g3 and attack his king. It's really not super clear what I'm going to do yet. Queen h5 is played. I go bishop e2, queen g6, bishop f3. I'm kind of just dancing around right now because it's kind of hard to find a correct plan to break through. I'm not ready to play knight e6 and give up my knight yet, but I'm not really sure what the best way of playing is. Knight f7 was played, and I play h4. And the engine's not a big fan of this move. It really thinks I should play knight to e6 at this point, or play knight takes f7, and I think I probably agree. Knight e6 is probably a good move, but I wasn't really so sure about it. After something like knight d8, I have to go bishop d5, I think. Or I guess the engine suggests I could just go g4. right away, and I think that probably would have been a better way of treating the position. For some reason, I thought I had to go bishop d5 here, but this pawn is well defended. So I think knight e6 would have been the consistent way of playing it, but in the game, I played pawn to h4, and black goes pawn to h5. So black is really looking to play knight to g4 here, which is kind of annoying. I go knight to f1, which I think is a kind of a clever move because I'm going to play knight to g3 and maybe target this pawn on h5. Obviously, black goes knight g4, which was kind of the intention, and I go queen to e2. So I still have a nice position here, but it's not really super clear how I'm going to break through. Queen f6 is played, and then I guess king to b1 was technically possible, but I didn't really want to allow his queen in regardless, even though it doesn't really seem like it does a whole lot. So I just played queen b2 and said, okay, let's just trade queens. He takes on g5, and then we trade queens. And then I think most of my advantage here is probably gone. I'm probably slightly better, but it's very hard to prove and to break through here. So rook to e8 was played, just defending this pawn some more. I don't really know what black should be doing here, to be honest. Maybe something like h4 or rook h8. It's kind of hard for black to really argue that he has any good plans here. But rook e8, I just take the knight and play knight g3. My argument is like, okay, my knight is probably better than your bishop, so I'll probably be doing well in this position. So pawn to e5 is played, and this is it's probably not the way to play. So I take en passant. King to g6 is played. The idea is because after rook takes, I can take on f5, and if bishop takes, I can also take on f5, and this is going to be unpleasant. So king to g6 is played to defend this pawn, maybe take this pawn on the next move, but I go rook to h1, rook takes e6, and I play rook h6 check, and black has to play king to g7 here to stop rook h7. But he blunders in the game and plays king to f7 and blunders this. So he still had 5 minutes on his clock. I think he was trying to flag me since there's no increment, so I think he was trying to play really quickly. And unfortunately, he played king f7 after only 3 seconds and resigned after rook to h7 check. But I thought this was a pretty cool game. Not necessarily my best game, according to the engine, but it's kind of hard to figure out where I'm supposed to break through in that middle game. I think maybe h4 was probably not the most consistent move, and I probably should have just gone knight e6 and then g4, which was kind of what I was gearing up to play the whole time. But outside of that, I thought it was a pretty reasonable game. Didn't really give him many chances at all, and I think we're going to move on to the next game. All right, so this is the second game, and I had a 21-17 rating in this one, 20-53 for my opponent. And then I had the black pieces in this game. My opponent opens up with c4, knight f6, d4, e6, knight c3, and bishop to b4 was played. So I have the Nimzo Indian defense on board, one of my main openings against d4. Pawn to e3, very standard line. Pawn to b6, looking to maybe fianchetto this bishop or maybe play bishop to a6. Not sure yet. Knight to f3 was played. I castled. Bishop to d2 was played. And this is probably hinting that he's going to play something like a3. And after bishop takes c3, he wants to take back on c3 and not double his pawns with b takes c3. So pretty normal stuff so far. I go bishop to a6, which is a pretty reasonable move. My idea is that I want to take after a3, which is what happens in the game. I want to play bishop takes c3, bishop takes c3, and d5, and take advantage of this pin right here. So that's kind of the whole point of bishop to a6. And after what happened in the game, which is c takes d5, I can take on f1. I think that's kind of an inaccuracy. I don't think he should allow me to take on f1 so that you have to take with the rook or the king, because then you can't castle. I think the more principled move would be to just play something like b3. I guess queen to a4 is also a possibility, but b3 is the move that I would be much more familiar with. I've had similar positions to that, but in the game, it was c takes d5, bishop takes f1, and there's not really time to play d takes e6 here because I can just drop my bishop back to c4. Also, I can drop it back to a6 or b5, it really doesn't matter. and I don't think white is going to be getting enough compensation here. After e takes f7, rook takes f7. Yes, white does have 2 pawns for the piece, but I just don't think it's going to be enough, especially considering white cannot castle still. So white's position is not going to be good there. So after bishop takes f1, I think rook takes f1 is pretty much forced. E takes d5, queen to c2. I think he's obviously hinting that he wants to castle queenside, especially since he can't castle kingside anymore. So I go knight b to d7. Maybe I could go c5 or knight e4 right away, but I just want to finish development. Don't do anything too crazy. And black castles queenside. So pretty standard position so far. Nothing too weird has happened. I just go knight to e4, and I'm thinking I might want to trade this knight off for this bishop. I know this bishop isn't very good, but if I could get to a position where it's just knight versus knight, I think I can, have a pretty good position, especially considering I have this c5 move coming very soon. He goes knight to d2, and I choose to take the bishop. And then I played queen f6. I think looking at it again, I probably should have just gone c5 right away, but I was a little bit concerned of d takes c5, I think, and after b takes c5, I'm not really sure what I'm doing here. I'm not really sure what my next plan is, and I was a little concerned that these pawns could get weak. There's also the consideration maybe I go rook c1 or rook c8, but I think then he can go c6, so I didn't want to allow that. Also, I don't want to take with the knight, because then this pawn becomes weak. So I figured I could probably play c5 later. So in the game, I played queen to f6. It's not the best move, but it has a very clear idea. The idea is I want to play c5 now, and if take, I'm going to take on c3, in between move, cause a damage to his pawn structure, and then I'm going to recapture on c5. So that's kind of my whole idea. So in the game, also important to note, he can't play queen takes c7 because of rook c8, and the queen would be gone. So in the game, it was king b1. So now he is threatening to play queen takes c7. So I play c5, as I was intending. And white goes knight to f3. So I think it's probably better to take on c5. And then after queen takes c3, b takes c3, I could probably take with the knight. B takes is interesting, but then I think my pawns kind of get undermined a little bit. Something like c4 or e4, and these pawns kind of start to become fragile. So knight takes would probably make a little bit more sense in this position, because I have ideas of knight d3, knight a4. I can target these weak pawns potentially in the future, and I think it's a pretty balanced position. It's probably relatively equal. If this knight moves, then I can play something like knight e4 and target this pawn. But in the game after c5, it was knight to f3, and then I think the critical move here is pawn to c4. So I don't want to allow white to take on c5 and target these pawns. And when I play c4, now this rook, honestly, both of these rooks don't really have much of a future. It's kind of hard to suggest a plan for white other than looking to play e4. So if I'm able to stop that, then I think I have a very easy position to play, because I can just run these pawns and slowly build an attack. So I think knight f3 as a result was probably a inaccuracy. I think that's why d takes c5 was so preferable. But knight f3, c4, he tries to play rook to e1 because he wants to play e4, but I play queen g6 check, and unfortunately, I just don't really see what white is supposed to do here. I'm giving a check, and I'm also hitting g2. e4 was tried, but after d takes e4, it's just very hard to suggest a move for white. White tries knight e5. I take on e5, d takes e5, and pawn to e3 check. So that's a check, and I am hitting f2, so king to a1 is played, and e takes f2. Rook e2 is played, and then I thought for legitimately 2 minutes here, and played b5, and I just completely did not see that this pawn on g2 is hanging. Like, I just did not see that for a second. In 2 minutes of thinking, I didn't notice it. And then also I played b5, which is, I still have an advantage after this move, but it's not even one of the top three suggestions. Queen takes g2 is obviously the best. Rook a d8 is a good move, and I actually was considering that, but chose not to play it. And queen g4 is also pretty decent, and I was considering that move as well. But in the game, I played pawn to b5, and I'm thinking, okay, I can just go a5, b4. Like, what is white going to do about that? So we have rook takes f2, a5, rook to d6 was played. I go queen to e4, and rook f3 was played. I'm not really all that sure what that move does. I think it just frees up the queen so that if I ever go queen to e1 check, like, the rook isn't hanging. Also, maybe he wants to play rook to e3 or queen e3. But other than that, I'm not really too sure. I mean, I think it's just a useful move in general. So I played b4, obviously. That's the move I was threatening. Obviously, you can't take because this is going to be devastating. So in the game, it was queen to e3. I trade queens, and I didn't really know what to do here. I guess I should probably play queen g4 or queen h4 and keep the queens on, but I was getting kind of concerned that white was getting a decent bit of counterplay with this pawn to e6 move coming, so I kind of panicked and traded queens and played rook to c8. White plays rook to b6, kind of hinting that he might be threatening doing this at some point. Not right away, though, because that would be delivering a check on the king, but I go pawn to c3 here, king to b1, and I give a check on c2, king to c1, and I chose to play rook to a7. So this is kind of a tricky position. I've only got 2 minutes on my clock. My opponent has been playing really quickly. He has 7 minutes, over 7 minutes still. And I really should just say, okay, I want to take care of my back rank. I want to play h6 or g6. That's definitely the best way to play. But instead, I chose to play rook to a7. And my idea is I kind of want to try and play rook to d7. So if something like h3 is played, I think rook to d7 is a pretty reasonable attempt. Rook d6 is really the only move that stops rook d1 threats. I guess you can maybe consider rook e1, but after rook d6, I think I have a pretty decent position after rook to b7. So, it's still unclear. It's not winning it, but after rook to d7, I'd have a good position. So after king to c1, I go rook a7, and he goes rook to d3. I go h6 now, just slightly too late. And white plays g4, like he's going to go attack me or something. And I go rook to e7. I guess it prefers rook to c4. That's a pretty good move. Or maybe rook to c5 or king h7. Any of those moves are pretty reasonable. I liked rook e7. But unfortunately, this allows a takes b4. And after rook takes e5, he actually has rook c3. Like, he 100% has rook to c3 here. And I'm only like slightly better. But he had 5+ minutes on his clock and resigned. So he didn't see rook to c3 clearly, and he thought he was just losing. But after rook to c3, it's like very not clear what I'm supposed to be doing here. I think if I give a check here, king takes c2, rook here, king to d3, rook takes c3, and then if b takes c3, rook takes h2. I think this is like just losing for me. So after something like b takes a5, so I'm like shocked that he resigned here, because I was getting really annoyed that I kind of thrown my advantage. But after a takes b4, rook takes e5, he just resigned. So he kind of gifted me a free win, because I think against a very strong player, this should be like a draw, or I might even lose this game because I've clearly given away my advantage, and I was kind of floundering for the last several moves, but I was lucky that he gifted me a win, especially with 5+ minutes on his clock. if he checked the analysis afterwards, he was probably pretty upset. But overall, I thought this was a very good game until I'd say right around this moment when I played b5. I mean, if I just play queen takes g2, I think it's a relatively straightforward win. But as soon as I started thinking and played b5, and then I think I started to lose the thread a little bit. But pretty decent game. Probably not as good as that first game, but there were some good highlights. I played very well in the opening, but not some of my best conversion. So I think that's going to be all for this video, and I will see you guys in the next one.